Let's go to chapter number 1 or session number 1, and we're going to begin right there. Session number 1 is on the amazing influence of a grandparent. And right from the beginning, I want to say that there are two phrases that we use often in our ministry that we think will flow off the tip of your tongue after today. And the first one is this one: intentional Christian grandparents. That's our message to all of you, every individual grandparent that is here and that is watching. We want you to become an intentional Christian grandparent. In fact, we would say it this way: we want you to take one step. We want you to take a step from being a Christian grandparent into being an intentional Christian grandparent. Now, let me say, it doesn't mean being perfect, because I'm far from a perfect grandfather myself, but I am intentional. That's the change that has come in my life and in my wife's life as we have wrestled with these issues as well. You know, you can be intentional if you see your grandkids every day, and you can be intentional if you only see them once every 5 years. But you can be intentional in passing on your influence to your grandchildren. We certainly want that to be the case for all of you. So intentional Christian grandparents is our first message. The second one is this one: grandparenting matters. And this is our message to the leaders of the local church. It's our message to pastors and elders and church leaders in various positions. Well, we want to say to you, look, grandparenting matters. And you know why we say that? It's because grandparenting doesn't matter. In virtually all of the churches in America, that's our passion. Grandparenting gets overlooked in churches. They don't talk about it. They don't talk about this relationship that is so critical and so helpful in seeing the youngest generations follow God. And we want to say to church leaders, we're praying for a national movement. We're praying for churches all across the United States and in other countries as well to get this vision for the significance of grandparenting. We want you to see that grandparenting matters. It's worthy of some support. It's worthy of some equipping. It's worthy of some attention. And we want to see a change being made because we believe that we can have an incredible impact on our country in the days ahead. We're praying for a national movement. We're praying for grandparents all across the country to step it up, and we want to do that through the ministry of the local church. So these are two phrases that we use a lot. Now, I want to introduce my family to you, or my family line. I want you to meet my grandfathers. This is the first one. This is my mother's dad. He was called Bud. His name is Harry Smith, but everybody called him Bud. I grew up on a cattle ranch in western Nebraska. He also had a ranch or farm out there, and he lived about 100 miles away from us. We wouldn't go see him real regularly, but maybe a couple times a year because we had a milk cow. And you know, if you live on a ranch or farm, you have a milk cow, you can't go very far. You have to be there in the morning to milk her and night to milk her, and so you can't go. So during the day, we would go to visit this grandfather a couple times. Here was his claim to fame. That is one large pig, isn't it? In fact, sometime in the 20s or 30s, he took that pig to the World's Fair. Now, the World's Fair was held in central United States, Midwest, a number of years during that period of time. Chicago, Omaha, St. Louis, Des Moines, different places. Well, one of those times, he took that hog and he won world champion hog in the World's Fair. Now, that was my grandpa's claim to fame, that grandfather. But the point about this grandfather that I'd like to make is, I do not remember, I have no memory of a single conversation I ever had with this grandpa. I don't remember a single one. I think when we went to visit him, I played with my cousins, and he talked with the adults, and I don't remember any impact or any input that he ever made into my life. He was a good moral man. He wasn't a believer in Jesus Christ until not long before he passed away, but he had a lot to offer, and yet he didn't have the vision to ever share that with me. Now, this is my dad's dad. His name is Edgar Fowler. He lived on the same cattle ranch with us. In fact, he and my dad were partners in their ranching business. And he not only lived on the same ranch with us, he actually lived with us after my grandma passed away. This is a picture of my grandpa playing checkers with me. He was a deeply devoted Christ follower and was a wonderful example to me in his life and his testimony, his morality, and all of those things. But even by this grandpa, I felt cheated a little bit once I became an adult, and I learned about some things from my older brother, who's 9 years older than me. My older brother said that this grandpa would go into town to buy supplies. Now, we lived out in the country where we had to drive 40 miles to get groceries, so it was a drive. And he would go in to get supplies. He would take my brother along, and my brother said that all along the way, this grandpa would talk to him, and he would talk to him about real important things, about spiritual things, about what it means to be a man, about moral issues, and all things. And my grandpa intentionally mentored my older brother. But for some reason, maybe it was a period of time, the years in between, but when I became of age to do that kind of thing, this grandpa did not do that same thing with me. So I even felt a little cheated as I learned about that, even concerning this grandpa. This is my dad. My dad passed away when my daughter was less than a year old, and I was just 25. So I didn't get to see my dad grandparent either. What that means in my family line, when I became a grandfather, I really didn't have a good example to follow in my family of what it means to be an intentional Christian grandfather. Now, how do you learn to be a good grandparent? How do you learn what it means? And I was just kind of on my own. My grandparenting experience started, of course, with the birth of my first grandchild who was born on my birthday. That was pretty cool. But not long after, a few years later, my daughter's marriage failed, and she and her 3 little ones moved in with us. Our son-in-law had made some terrible decisions, and I did not want my grandsons to follow in the sins of their father. And I wanted to start being a more intentional grandfather. And I began a journey to figure out what does that look like and what is it like. But in my family line, I really didn't have any examples. I want you to have kind of a get-acquainted discussion at your tables and in your groups. And here's a question I want you to discuss together. What did you learn about grandparenting from your grandparents? What did you learn about grandparenting from your grandparents? Go.